You are watching Reed's Conversations, a podcast series on writing, filmmaking, acting, and theater. For today's episode, I'll have a conversation with actor and audiobook narrator Tom Haire. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Reed's Conversations, the podcast series that we talk about writing, filmmaking, acting, and theater. And today, I'm very grateful and excited to have a very special guest on my show. This is an actor who has been with me for the first stage reading production of Magical Candy that I wrote, produced, and directed. So I have the great pleasure of having the great Tom Haire, actor, on my podcast. So thank you so much for joining us, Tom.
Hey, Reed. Thank you for having me. This is a wonderful thing to have. It's a wonderful honor, and I appreciate you setting it up. It's a lot of work. And thank you for having me on.
Of course, yeah. And I know we were just talking a little bit earlier before the interview started about the comp, like, is it Louisville versus Louisville? Because you're not
Uh,
originally from Bowling Green. You're originally from Louisville, Kentucky.
I'm from Louisville, Kentucky. Some say Louisville. Most of the world who knows about the town will say Louisville. Those from there call it Louisville, and I say Louisville because that's what I was raised to say, and it's kind of an unspoken rule. But I'm not one of those purists. I won't get on your back or speak down to you for not knowing how to pronounce it in the region.
Yeah, because sometimes if you're not careful, you'll have those people who are just if you say it however you think is proper, they'll go back on you and kind of give you a quote unquote proper education, which is not, oh, it's not really true, I guess.
And being in Kentucky, yeah, people, I guess, kind of give us that little bit, like, okay, fine, you can make fun of me a little for that, but it's.
Yeah. So with you in Louisville, so when you were young, growing up in Louisville, did you live there long and then move to Bowling Green? And I was curious because you're a wonderful actor, truly an amazing actor.
Thank
Just
you.
just within this year itself, seeing the breadth of your work from what you did for Magical Candy, which as a director was my debut as a director.
Hmm.
I had assisted directed other productions before, but this was my first time as solo. I was my own boss in a way of how things were, how I want
Hmm.
things to go about in a sense. So, but then also you did Anne of Green Gables, which I really wanted to see that production. So I was devastated when I couldn't see you as Matthew Cuthbert in that
Hmm.
production. But yeah, so then you did other ones like Agatha Christie's The Witness for the Prosecution, and then you did Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House.
Haunting of Hill House.
Yes, which was amazing. So, but where did all that start? How did your love of acting come about? Was it really instilled at a young age, or was it something when you got older? Because sometimes that happens if you're not, it's only until you're like in high school or college where it's like, you know what? I'm gonna try this acting, see how it is. So how did it start for you?
Well, not to get terribly personal, but hopefully relatable. I think I found company in stories, in somewhat fantasy story. Roald Dahl, when I was younger, read a lot of that. Um, Things that were maybe just a bit more mature or just kind of a challenge, but things I could get lost in. Uh, it was a wonderful. They still are. Books, especially, are a wonderful comfort. However, when I started to see movies, or when I kind of saw Star Wars, or these things that were around back in the 80s and early 90s, and Jurassic Park and all these things, and then I discovered James Bond. And I recall very vividly when I was a kid during the holidays at the grandparents, Sean Connery was on the screen, and I would imitate. And I thought that's not a bad way to spend your time. And if I can find a way to do that, which it turns out, they would have that at school. I was one of the. I remember I was 8 years old, in second grade, and I was asked to do a little part in Steamboating. They needed one more person, and I fit the bill, and it was Captain Number Two, and I had two lines, and one of them was, "What do you mean bathtub?" But It was easy. I remember being selfish with the role and um, really captivated by it, wanting to do my part. Ever since then, I did it as much as I could all throughout school. And then, I fell out because fear takes a lot of guts to do this full time. It's a big risk. And I needed to work on myself. Got a little, sometimes, you just need to take a break, find other passions, and collect yourself.
That's true, yeah. But that's really cool though, because sometimes you can do like a small part. What's that saying? There's no small parts, only small actors. So it makes sense where it's like I want to try to make this part my own, even at a young age. So that's amazing, and I love Sean Connery too. So on the topic of Sean Connery, can you do a good Sean Connery impression since we mentioned him?
I used to do that. That was the first impression I ever did.
Hmm.
I don't know if it's much him any longer, but when I was younger, when they took off my braces, I was given a retainer, and that retainer made it turn my voice perfectly into him, even as a kid.
Oh, that's so cool. Because I sometimes do a little bit of Sean Connery, and it's, he's the very deep voice
Which,
of that, accent.
oh,
Yeah, it's very deep. If you think about more of the older Sean Connery, but then if you talk
so,
more of the younger, kind of like the
oh,
younger.
Moneypenny.
Yeah, exactly. So that's so cool. So it's nice to have another fan of Sean Connery, and I love your
Oh yeah,
impression too. It's kind of like I'm ready to be impressed.
these characters, their outfits, they're just suits. You can just kind of walk in and out, and I think
Yeah.
that's a beautiful thing about if you watch a movie, even if there's no sets or plot or props or anything like that, if things are compelling and people are really into it, you can make something really really good.
Yeah, and that's right because I think we sometimes, when we're adults, we sometimes fear with kids. If you look at a lot of children's programs, they think, "Oh, we need to give them this." But kids, even with kids, their imaginations are bright. Where, even if like what we did for Magical Candy, we had no props. I mean, not really. We just had the stage and us some microphones, but it was both great seeing both the kids and adults just just being invested in the story, which surprised me because I was afraid that it would be not boring, but I thought like, will we be able to sustain interest? And they did, and that's one example that comes to mind from a personal experience. And you were in that production, and
Hmm.
I
Thank
think one
you.
and I think one person just now on Facebook. I think she said, I love his voice. I think she said, I told him I can listen to him even if it's just reading the phone book all day, which is the
I
high.
would do it.
Yeah.
That that would be a challenge. I think that would be top tier
Yeah.
audiobook challenge to
Yeah.
have and take.
And that's just credit to you as an actor. But after this production you did as a little kid, did you do any other productions or were you in any other high school dramas or even college, or did you do anything like that at a point after your first starring debut, even if it was just what do you mean bathtub line?
I did every show I could in grade school. Um, it was kind of a challenge to do anything outside of schools, being in that situation. Things were I just kind of had to be self reliant
Yeah.
and I had to do the best I could at that time. So I did as many as I could. And it's kind of, you're in this little world and you feel like, uh, as you become a seventh and eighth grader or a junior or senior, you are given preference to get these larger roles. But that was never a concern to me. Um, I always kind of played the supporting character, I guess, kind of a Walter Matthau.
Uh,
Jack Lemmon always felt like the lead, and then because there was kind of stuff like that, but it was very collaborative. I learned somewhat how to network. I learned how to deal with difficult producers,
mhm.
directors. We had a teacher who was both the producer and kind of director in charge of the middle school theater, and he was severe.
Oh.
So I knew very early he was the most disciplined and difficult person I've ever had to work with.
Oh
But
man.
I knew what to do very quickly. I knew what to do, and so uh, like a Stanley Kubrick
Oh man.
kind of, but not, but for kids.
Oh
But
no.
I've never, it kind of toughened me up. It's made me a little prickly, I think. But um, sorry, I forgot what the question was. But yes, I continued on
Yeah.
into high school, and then I tried to go to college at Murray State. We did a lot of collaboration at the school. Unfortunately, I used it more as a place to sleep,
Mhm.
not to go to class or anything. And then we were able to get more broad. We did some one act shows that we had written. We did the Laramie Project
Oh wow.
in a seated performance. There was about 50 people max who could watch. It was the most avant garde, or I don't even know but I had never done that before. It was similar. It was just like Magical Candy. Um, however, you'd have to flip the narrative and the tone.
Mhm.
Um, and then we did. I did a couple shows at a local theater there. The Kentucky Cycle was one of them, which is a 9 act show,
Mhm.
which was 2 days, I believe, when it was on Broadway. We condensed it down. We played multiple roles, and then I came back to Louisville to get some help, and now I'm back because of you
Aw, I appreciate. Oh man, I appreciate that.
for resparking everything. And I don't think I'm done with it. It's not. I don't think it's done with me. And I hope I can help. I hope people like what I want to. I want to entertain. That's what
Oh,
I want.
oh, and you're a great entertainer too,
Thank you.
and I appreciate that because, my gosh, because when I did Magical Candy, that was it was an important project because just for me speaking quickly, just as the director of that piece and the writer, it was written over a course of good number of years. And what's crazy about that was, well, long story short, I actually wrote that when I was still in a wheelchair because I was actually hit by a car back in 2015 as a pedestrian, almost getting run over completely. And I had always had the idea of adapting the story, like even around 2004 or
Jeez.
yeah.
I'm sorry.
Well, so after what happened, so what happened was I think I was, wheelchair bound, so it's taken me years to kind of recover to where I am now.
Sure.
So what happened during that time was I finally thought, well, it takes a near death experience to realize, you know what, I want to try to write this, and I tried to do the best way possible. And I just took my time where I would start on it, and it's like, you know what, I can't do a comedy at the moment, so I'll put this on the shelf and I'll work on other scripts. But then finally, within the last recent years, during the pandemic lockdown, because everyone it was crazy,
Yeah.
so I finished that. And thankfully, by that time, a little more mobile, but I still have to rely on things like a cane or electric wheelchair if, depending on how my body's feeling, because I still have. So anyway, not to detract from your interview, but anyway, so what happened was that I finally had an opportunity to get it produced through Christopher Cherry at the Exclaim Youth Center, and I known him for a good couple of years. So when it came time for casting, I knew the casting challenges would be just needing some really good actors that would hopefully not just bring my characters to life, but also showcase their talents. So I wanted to kind of ask you. So now here. How did you hear about Magical Candy? How did you hear about? I want to hear your step-by-step process of hearing the news about it, auditioning, and so I want to hear your perspective on that.
Well, not to get too out there, but it's kind of like the universe tapping on your door. I work full time at a bank downtown. Xclaim Theater, they're a client, and he comes in, and we would talk about shows coming up and all this stuff. And he mentioned yours, and I thought, hey, you know what? When can I come in? And he's like, here's my number. I'm going to text you. And so I did. We messaged each other. And I really think, that's a lot. You'll hear Hollywood stories like that. This isn't that. But I
Yeah.
mean, what I mean is like, oh, that actor he was working at a Home Depot, and somebody's like, hey, you look cool. Yeah, all right. But in a nutshell, I guess like look for opportunities, and if opportunities are there, learn to recognize them. They may be everywhere. And so I popped in, and we had a good time. I think just I wanted to go in without holding back,
Mhm.
not taking it for granted, and not treating it like a joke.
Yeah.
But and so that was kind of my attitude. And I think that's probably what everybody probably should have that. Everybody
Yeah.
should.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I tell myself that all the time. But it was instantly relaxed. It was
Good.
non-threatening. It felt like a good environment. I
Good.
think that there was instant trust.
Good. I appreciate that because that's what I wanted to establish with anyone auditioning. And so when you came in, I was like, okay, gosh, I hope he's good. And you were reading, I think you were reading some lines from a character named Dr. Ezekiel Dawes first. And
Mm-hmm.
I forget if I had you also read, I'm trying to remember. Do you remember the characters you read for during your audition?
Oh, the script is right in there. Well, there's the senator, several. Um, I especially remember the senator, but because that was the very collaborative. But I was also I can't remember the name. Oh gosh,
It's okay.
the father of the girl.
Oh yeah, William Bostwick.
Yeah, yes, yes.
Yeah, because and at that point in the casting, sometimes you're lucky in casting where you have a lot of people that it's kind of like you have too many names to choose from. It's like, gosh, I don't want to, uh, you know, pick this. But in my case, I didn't have that luxury where I had everyone that came into audition. I knew like, okay, they're automatically getting a part. So that's why. So after audition and hearing how well you read, I'm like. I definitely need him in my production. So I owe a lot to you, to all the cast, because honestly, if we didn't have a lot of characters or actors as these characters, we wouldn't have a production. So it really goes a lot to you, honestly, and others that contributed that really made it success as it was, for even if it was just a one-time performance. So thank you so much for coming in that day. So yeah, that's what I that's my perspective from that audition process.
Well, thank you. And that's the way it works. There's a lot of good spirited people. No one's trying to. My general attitude for the about arts in general are I think every artist should have, if we're going to talk, I don't think
Yes,
I'm an
yeah,
artist or anything,
yeah.
but if somebody needs a doctor
Hmm.
in the middle of a restaurant, I will never volunteer myself. I don't feel like we should be having fun for the sake of the audience who are spending their money.
Yes.
And with them, we should honor the text while doing that. There's a lot that goes into it,
Hmm.
but I never think it's not life saving. I think there's an importance, there's a need for it. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
And like everything, it can be commercialized. But first and foremost, we're not. I don't think we should be selfish.
Yes, exactly.
I think that's an instant, and that, and that, and I, and there's lots of ways to going about it. You could be the Stanley Kubrick kind of unselfish, or the Ron Howard set kind of selfish or
Yeah.
unselfish. But it is for the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think that's what happens when you get kind of swept into if you're an actor or a director. It's kind of like your ego suddenly takes over everything, and that can be very detrimental for not just how you're directing, but also the people that you're working with, because you definitely want it to be very relaxed. So that was kind of like my goal as a director to make sure all of my actors were relaxed, and especially given the time constraints, because I think we only had 4 days total, not including the final dress rehearsal the day of the show.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so it was like, so it's not your typical production of we have a month or 2 months. It was like, nope, this is it. And I think Christopher Cherry put it rightly, where he's like, okay, Reed is the director, but he's the traffic cop. He's just going to do this. So I'm just grateful that I had good people. That was my main mission too, just to make sure everyone was good, because honestly, if there was any like those drama types, they would have been kicked out. Like, hey, there's no need for it here. So I agree 100% of what you just said, Tom. That's exactly right, because you need a good attitude. And what and yeah, so after we did so once you got the part, so I think your parts, I think my biggest regret was that after I had a chance to review the production, I thought, gosh, I should put Tom in, I should have gave more Tom speaking parts in Act One, because there was like some pedestrians here and there, because so but you did fantastic. You were game, and so that was my big regret of not having you speak more in Act One, because I did a butler, and I'm like, Tom could have done that role, and I was doing more
I
of a
love butlers.
yeah, it was like the turning Clarabelle away, the first person that turned
Hmm.
Clarabelle away. It was like, away with you, we don't want any of your riffraff at our door. I was doing a bad Sean Connery impression, so if I would have been like, oh, Tom could do Sean Connery, have him do that part. But you
Get
did,
yourself away from here.
yeah. Oh my gosh,
We
that's
don't want your kind.
yes, exactly. That would have been so much better. So gosh, so those are, but you were fantastic. You really brought your parts to life. You brought life into them. So, and that's something that not just me, but all the audience members noticed during that production. So, so talk a little bit more about your process when you're studying lines and characters, and not just for Magical Candy, but just for any character that you're approaching when you're acting.
Um, so I read something in an interview with Al Pacino. It was a movie interview, but it was a kind of an arts interview, not like Entertainment Tonight. But he was talking about an actor named John Gielgud, who's a British actor. If you've seen Arthur with Dudley Moore, he's the
Yes, that,
butler. Big, huge actor. He's English over there, and Al Pacino commented like you could tell the freedom. He is unafraid. He knows exactly where he is, but he's a character who is who has their own kind of feelings and emotions, but he's not afraid whatsoever of showing those.
yeah,
There was no. It was, I guess, if very professional to him and a person who knew what they were doing. So my ideal is to first relax into the role, kind of forget myself. And especially during Haunting of Hill House, I'd been reading a book on monologues and trying to use that to the whole story. Of course, you have to find the motivation the characters need, find their part in the plot. But what I like to do is basically take every line, make it as personal to the character as possible, because if they have an overarching goal, their little goals in between are what are going to get them there. They may stumble, which they should, and hopefully they'll find something that will be what they wanted, or if not, something better or worse. So the first thing is to take the big and then shrink it down beat by beat to all the little smaller beats. Know what I'm talking about through each scene. It's kind of fun to improvise the lines, rehearse them all throughout the play. But probably the biggest benefit, and one thing that's indispensable when it comes to theater, is is a partner.
yeah.
I'm lucky to have my girlfriend who would, God bless her, she knows the play better than anybody else,
Aw.
because we would recite she would check me for lines. And really what my motivation here was to have the attitude of somebody in New York or Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
We have 3 months to put on 4 performances.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to boil it down to their level, they have 4 weeks to put on 3 months of performances.
Mm-hmm.
So they have to get down to the nitty gritty. And that was kind of my attitude toward it. And I'll admit, I put work to the wayside. I shouldn't say that, but my mind was constantly on it. And honestly, the best way to do it is just to really enjoy it. And I think be interested in it. You can't force anybody to, but even when it's boring, you've got to read it. And if you're
Yeah.
not getting it and it's boring, you've got to keep going over it.
Yes.
because people are going to come in with $16.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to hand over $16, and I want 700 people or however many that theater fits in seats every single night. I know it won't. More than likely, it won't. I want it. I want it so bad, but I want to give them a $20 performance, or a $32 performance, preferably, or $160 performance. Not to get off track, but those are my motivations. Excuse me. Yeah. And then to fill out the character, really by, and I think that's kind of my, like, I don't want to put this wrongly, that's what the actor interprets, and that's where the authenticity comes in. How I have to know if the doctor is frustrated, scared, what have you, and how to interpret that. And on top of that, why isn't that person speaking right now? Because somebody else is speaking and they're much more compelling than what. So the best way to take notes, I take a lot of notes all throughout, and I keep it to myself, the I. Recently, I read a book called The Art and Science of Acting on Film, where it breaks down basically auditions. But I see everything I'm blessed to do as an audition for the next one.
Yeah,
because who knows who's watching?
That's right.
I don't know, and it's happened before. It'll happen again. So flesh out the character, knowing their purpose, their relation to the story. I play in The Haunting of Hill House. I knew I was the character that kind of spurred on the plot, and then others took it away in the story. And you could go crazy. You could write a 300-page novel, a fictional biography. But at the end of the day, you got to do the show. And nothing beats experience like doing.
Yes.
So the best I could say is read it as much as possible, take as many notes as possible. And when the show's over, let the show be over and focus on other things.
Yeah. And that's fantastic advice, because I think you can tell if you have an experienced actor versus someone who can just say it without realizing what the subtext is, even if it's just a simple line like, "What do you mean, bathtub?" You can take something as simple as that, and you can be, "What do you mean, bathtub?" Or "What do you mean?" Or like, "What do you mean, bath?" You can still interpret it, just with that even as something as simple as that. So that is extremely true, because I think people just get the misunderstanding who are not actors, thinking like, oh, you just go up there, but it's like, no, it takes a lot of homework. Like you just said, refining the trying to get it to where it's like, okay, I can make this personable and I can, go to town with this. And like you said, just have people get, their money's worth out of this. So yeah, that's extremely true.
Like I said, it's not open heart surgery.
Yeah.
But, surgeons have a stressful life.
Mm-hmm.
What if they're in that audience and they need that? That's what they need that night. What if they're in the audience, right? That's what you need to give them, because they just have had a long, probably week. So that's what people need.
Yes. Kind of like a stress reliever in a way, just to relieve the stress. Yeah, just watch a good comedy, or it's like, you know what? I want to watch a good thriller. Just something that's that's entertaining. That's what it is. We're in the entertainment business. Exactly.
I think we have to focus, like hone skill or instincts that I should work just as hard as they do. So to know what is good.
Yes.
To know what is presentable and why, and what isn't and why.
Yeah, and I was going to ask, can you pick out, let's pick out just a random movie and select an actor's performance that really captivated you, just as a audience member. Is there anything, like, just use an example of what you're talking about? Think about an actor who was like, wow, that I forgot he's the actor, he's that character. Does any names come to mind from any plays or movies that you've watched where it really stands out to you, what of the level of
Sure.
that?
I was thinking about Robert Mitchum. I think about Robert Mitchum weekly because he was doing he did a couple of movies, the Raymond Chandler books, the Philip Marlowe, like
Yeah.
Long Goodbye, and he did a one called Farewell, My Lovely,
Mhm.
and it takes place mostly. He's telling the story in a flashback from a hotel room, and he's telling it to a police lieutenant. He's trying to convince the lieutenant for his help, play to his sympathies. And he's telling this long monologue in the hotel, and he's tired, and he's on the run, he hasn't slept, and he's telling this, and then all of a sudden, it's like he just disappeared, and there was no actor there. It was like watching this documentary. It was strange, and you could feel it. Like this guy just took over the screen, and this was the point. This is the reason why we're here.
Oh,
Somebody's actually doing it in front of you, and it's kind of mind-boggling.
yeah, but that's the beauty of acting is kind of like, yourself disappears or you put yourself in that character and it's like, wow, I forget this is an actor. This is just a person in their moment of their life telling us what happened. So yeah, and I think that's the beauty of acting, just being able to do that.
And and with film, it's much harder. That could have been the first thing they shot,
Hmm.
and it's the last thing at the end of it's toward the end of the movie, and that could have been the first thing scene they shot.
Yes.
And then 10 hours later or the next day, you need to go in and start with the middle of the movie because the actor you're going to be working with has to get on set to another show. So, it's acting is more than acting.
Yeah, it's discipline. What's that? Because I think people don't realize when some movies they're shot out of sequence and that's just due to budget reasons and also say if you get a rainstorm and it's like, well, we can't shoot that scene outside, so let's retool the schedule and shoot in this gym where the set is. So that kind of requires a level of actors to bring them from a story level, be in that moment where it's like, okay, even though this is not the beginning of a story, I have to place myself mentally where the scene is, try to remember the trajectory story-wise of my character. But yeah, and I think with the luxury of stage productions, it's all happening. You don't, it's not, it is technical, but it's a different technical aspect where it's like, oh, I'm just on stage, and as long as I don't forget my lines, we're good, or if a slight doesn't crash, we're good, or something like that.
And maybe they all have their challenges
Yeah.
because for a director of theater, opening night, it's not theirs anymore.
No, it isn't.
They may be able to give notes and all that, but I've done, I don't mean to, I'm not a rebel or a Mickey Rourke or anything like that. But I've done things on stage I was told not to do.
Oh, okay.
Well, no, just like I want you to stand here and go over there. When I'll stand there and go somewhere else because I not to be catty or anything, but because it felt right, not to
Yeah.
be, but little things that
Mhm.
feel, I guess, right during the show that didn't feel right during rehearsal or
Mhm.
but and it's controlled chaos.
Yeah, and I think just having an adaptability or and sometimes if a director does want you to do some things, I think sometimes if it's appropriate, you can ask them, "Hey, what can you tell me the purpose of this?" And if they say, "Well, the reason I want you to stand here versus here is simply the audience sees you better from a angle," or and sometimes it can be that, or it's like, no, I just yeah. So yeah, you'll definitely encounter different types of directors. But here's a question for you, because I know when we did Magical Candy, there was some, I want to say rewrites, but as we were doing our rehearsals, that was very informative because that as a writer and director, I realized, oh, I need another story moment between these characters. So I remember giving you updates saying, hey, Tom, here's some new lines. Are you going to be okay with it? And we're like, sure. So for viewers who are studying acting, say if something's thrown at you from left field, like a new line of dialogue, what's the best way to react and tackling a new dialogue if you haven't had time to rehearse it? Where it's like, oh, we're going to do this now. Okay. So can you give your insight on that?
Well, excuse me one second.
You're good.
Some of the greatest movies of all time have been rewritten as the movie is made.
Yes.
And I feel like if better people, if legends in the industry or what have you are able to do it, if they're flexible, and if that's just what you just got to do it. I
Yeah.
mean, this monologue book that I'm reading, when you look at a monologue, it ends, let's just say for sake of argument, when it starts with the character wanting to get something across. And in between and at the end, they feel like they've gotten it done. Otherwise, why they stop talking.
Yeah.
And they're just trying to find in between what's going on or how to get it out. And the same with dialogue, because a scene has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end, just as much as the whole show.
Yes.
So that's just a part of it. And a new line of dialogue here, right there, may influence everything. I don't know. Well, I got to figure that out.
Yeah.
So that's the job. And I say that, and I would love to be. I would love for somebody to throw those words back at me if I'm ever on like a very difficult shoot. Let's say that I would love to be challenged, and someone say, "Hey, that's the job." I'm like, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's like there are other actors, Christian Bale, who'll gain 60 pounds or he'll lose 100.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
I don't know if that's necessary.
It's extreme. It's like a total talk about commitment. It's like how health wise, how do you deal with? Yeah.
Because when you write a script has no budget. A script is whatever's here, you can put in there. You can make a movie worth $1 billion. So you can do impossible things.
Yeah.
And doesn't mean you can do them. Doesn't mean you should.
Yeah.
There's an argument either way.
Yeah, because I think because that's true because when you're writing it, it's only when you get to the actual production stage of it, it's like, oh, do we really need 10,000 horses going across the Stampede? I don't know if we get the Wrangler. Can we just do maybe 30? And is that, and so that's where budget, and sometimes, it is good to just kind of write what you come up with. And it's only when you get towards a production where it's like, maybe I should just tweak it. And that's more from a budget and writing standpoint. But it's true though, because your imagination's the only limitation you have. But yeah, but I think just from my perspective, when you did those new lines, you were wonderful. You're like, okay, sure, let's work with it. And it worked better because there was some nice little moments that you did. Or the funniest thing, I think, what happened minutes before we did the actual production, where Wendy Silva, I have to get a shout out to Wendy Silva.
Absolutely.
She was in Magical Candy, and she also directed Witness for the Prosecution, and was the soundboard operator for Haunting of Hill House. So, and this can go for acting too. Like I remember writing a simple line of dialogue from your character, Edward Johnston, trying to be a senator. And it was simple line is like, well, we need everyone's support, or we need everyone's vote, even hers. But then, of course, I know about the suffragette movement. I know women couldn't vote and stuff like that. But then Wendy reminded me politely, says, hey, Reed, I just want to let you know that women couldn't vote in the 1900s. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you're right. That was a total brain fart. And and it wasn't an easy fix, thankfully, but I was like, hey, Tom, I got a note for you. You're like, sure, sure. It's like, all right, we're going to cross out.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to put down support. And sometimes it's kind of like, and so thank goodness we had the scripts in front of us. But and so that was what I loved about you as an actor in that production. You were very adaptable. And if something as last minute as that, because for me, I could have been like, no, just leave it in. But I thought, no, we need the accuracy in this. So you were game. You're like, yeah, I'll just write off vote and we'll put in support. But yeah, so that was wonderful what you did as an actor, just trying to rise to the challenges of that stuff. And it makes it better. It just makes the overall production better. So I can't thank you enough for that. Good
Well,
sir.
thank you. Uh, I think I'm kind of an odd guy when it comes to that. I don't know. I tend to just sit down and be quiet and talk when I'm supposed to. I don't know.
Uh,
Um, it's just easier that way because there's something about the theater about this kind of stuff that's just very calming. Um, it's so non-judgmental, and I've seen people do crazy things on stage. And what
mm,
I used to do as a kid in just my bedroom or in the backyard,
yeah.
and people do it. People get paid for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Like breaking plates. Yeah, of course I'll break some plates if I
Sure, of course.
but
Well,
also but yeah, so with Magical Candy, let's talk about the opening night. So after we did through the performance and got through it, um, again, I can't think how much you did at performance and everybody really, because with even though I wrote and directed it, it wouldn't have been nothing without the actor. So that I'm forever in your debt.
great
Seriously.
people.
Yeah. And so but then after you did Magical Candy, you went on to do Anne of Green Gables, and then that led you to do Agatha Christie's Witness for the Prosecution, and then
Hmm.
it's Haunting of Hill House. So talk about that. So once so the night of that performance of Magical Candy, that led to these other productions, and also with Fountain Square Players. So I love to because I'm a Fountain Square Player alum.
Yeah,
I wouldn't call me alumni, but I've had a history of doing plays with them too, musicals and everything. So would you be able to talk about that if you're able to?
sure. So again, so Wendy was in Magical Candy, and I had known since day one of meeting her that when it's for the prosecution was something that she was going to be doing in summer. I don't really know what happened with Anne of Green Gables. It just kind of, I think they needed somebody to fill in,
Mhm.
and I was happy to do it. And
Aw,
just the that was different. That was to support the kids,
sure.
make sure be a kind of a distant uncle and let them be silly and all that stuff, and just facilitate that as best I could. And I auditioned for Witness for the Prosecution in May, uh, and they were fortunate. They were kind enough to give me the role of Leonard Vole,
Mhm.
the scoundrel or angel,
Yeah.
depending on who you ask and what time you ask him. Um, Shaves the beard to look a little younger. Um, I who's and somebody asked toward the end of that show if I was going to do the Haunting of Hill House, and I said no.
Really? You didn't
It
really?
was too much work. It was
Mm,
so much work, and I'm exhausted. Because I think that if you were to ask me right after the show, I was going to say no. That week was with work and then helping with the show. It was just I was done. So I took a week off for the performance of The Haunting of Hill House. I was like, I got to make that everything, or I'm not going to get any sleep.
yeah.
And then you know what? I was like, you know what? No, 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 no. I saw a video from Philip Seymour Hoffman who said, "Look, if somebody asks you to act, you do it.
Mm,
You take the opportunity.
yes.
You're going to find something else. The best way to do it is to learn is by doing. The best way to learn anything is just to do it."
Yeah.
So that's what I did. And I didn't know anything about the show other than the movie in the 90s,
Yeah.
which I saw in the theater. I'll brag. And yeah, it was a good time. And they called me to do another sit in. And they asked me to be Dr. Mayhew.
Yes.
I grew the beard back.
Yeah, yes. And that was great because I marveled at those productions too. Because, obviously, I wanted to be there in support of you and also Wendy Silva when she did Witness for Prosecution. But those are two really magnificent plays because going back to monologues, because I remember just watching Witness for the Prosecution. It's like, oh, Tom doesn't have his beard. Like, okay, good, good. And but as you were doing, but it was multiple scenes because you had the scene where you were interviewed by I think the judge and the lawyer, and you were just talking as your character, you're talking, and then you did another scene as the when you were there to defend yourself
Mm-hmm.
on the stand. those were huge monologues. So it's a real testament of your dedication to really, you know, I mean, those were huge. So you did fantastic in that production, honestly. And Haunting of Hill House, which had a great monologue describing the history of the house, trying not to allude of it, or it's kind of like your character was trying to minimize the hauntings in a way. But yeah, those
Thank you.
monologues, yeah, I mean,
Thank you.
you nailed it. Because I know it's, yeah, because the monologues. And there's because how many pages would you say for those monologues, for those productions? Like how many was Witness for the Prosecution and how many were Haunting of Hill House?
It, it was a lot. Um, with Witness for the Prosecution, 3 scenes. I just had 3 scenes: entering, being interviewed, interrogated, and then the verdict. So that's kind of how I saw it. And that was the exhausting part. And with the Haunting of Hill House, now every day I work on my voice. I work on my diaphragm. I try to do voice exercises every day because at the end of certain large scenes, it's exhausting, and
Hmm.
it's tough in here,
Yeah.
and it's even down here in these muscles. And there's a way to cultivate it over time, so you don't hear this a lot.
Yeah.
That you should always drink beneficial beverages, eat a peppermint every now and then, always stay hydrated.
Yes.
Um, so just break it down one bit at a time.
Hmm.
I don't really know how else to go about it, but to lose yourself and have fun and make sure you collaborate. Uh, don't be boring.
Hmm.
Work on it not being boring. You kind of have a captive audience. Where's the audience you have on stage? With Witness for the Prosecution, you have the jury. That's who you're talking to. With Dr. Montague in Haunting of Hill House, you have these 3 students.
Hmm.
Find your level of authority and kind of occupy that corner of it and make yourself distinct. Also, let's not shy away from it. It's a time to shine. And I think monologues require moderation because they're in the middle of the show. And if you focus on the intent above anything else and the characterization and where the story is going, all that emotion and all that stuff will be seen.
Yes.
That's why sacrifice the self, what have you, the ego of it, and give it to the audience, and they'll decide, and it'll take care of itself.
Absolutely.
So, get the juices going, move the story forward. Does this move the story forward? And I think that makes it easier. It's like, I know why I'm doing this now.
Yeah.
If you can figure out, I'm a person, I need to know why I'll get stuck on that. You can tell me 2 + 2 = 4. I need to know why.
Yeah. It's like,
Why
yeah.
is that? Why you told me, but so tell me why.
Yeah. It's kind of like
Uh,
just 1, 2, 3, 4. Or,
Thank you. Okay, great.
yeah.
That's all you need. That's all I
Yeah.
need. Keep as simple as possible. And a great thing about acting is, really there is this: if you're concentrating on what's good and on the audience, hone those instincts, and you can ask yourself all these questions.
Yeah.
You can rely on yourself or other people.
Hmm. That's true. Very true. My gosh, because yeah, and that's really you hit the nail head on. And I think that's also what you talked about with voice. I think people don't realize you have to your voice is your instrument, and it's really important to really take care of that instrument because if you don't, stay hydrated or take a peppermint or even drink something like, just kind of like, so that's why it's kind of like if you're gonna be acting, as much as you like singing karaoke, it's like just know like, okay, if I'm gonna sing karaoke at just hanging out with friends the night before I act, I'm gonna really hurt my voice. So can you talk about tips you use to kind of help with your voice as far as just making sure you don't strain it too much, especially if you're doing
Sure.
like night after night after night. So yeah, what's your tips? Any tips for actors just for beginning?
excuse me.
Yeah,
Well, I don't work in restaurants anymore. You have to, so you have to work, yell. You have to be like, what would you like? Huh? Huh?
yeah.
Or have to yell at your coworkers. But so yeah, it is all about that mind body stuff. It really is. I don't mean to. I never try to be. I want to be technical when I say it.
Yeah.
As in, you have to take care of the whole thing. That means, a football player, they're not going to drink Dr. Pepper all day long.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to do the things. They're going to go see the trainers and do all that kind of stuff. Do things that are
I
similar.
think it is definitely important, like you just said earlier, just to keep your voice, just take care of it. Just don't, if you're, it's like football players don't drink Dr. Pepper all day before they go out because they're going to be dehydrated. But yeah, I think it's important for actors just to take, take care of just take care of yourself and your voice. So that way you're ready and sharp when you are doing these scenes, whether it's from front of a camera or on stage.
And take the what if. What if this was Broadway?
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're going to audition for one of those shows, what are the unspoken things that are already expected of you?
Mm-hmm.
And that would be one of them.
Yes.
Is to be able to, even just if you read a novel, there are shows that are one-person shows that are an hour and a half long.
Mm-hmm.
So can you read a novel on stage at that pitch for 45 minutes and then 45 minutes again?
Yes.
So those kinds of things. And if you feel like that's what somebody's expecting already, then, I'm a hypocrite. I don't do it every day. I need to be better. Always a student.
Yes. And that also brings me to my next question of you doing audiobook narration. How did you get into that? And how long have you been doing that for?
So I've been around it for about 4 years. I have 40 audiobooks, 45 audiobooks total,
Oh, wow.
but 30 that are professional, as in there's a monetary value behind it in some way. So, and I'm not alone. The pandemic pushed a lot of people into this type of independent work.
Yeah.
And Amazon, Audible, they have something called ACX, Audible Creation Exchange. It's kind of like it's a trading post. So an author puts up their books and for audition with an excerpt and a link to send it, to upload it. And then they have profiles as well. And then narrators have their own profile. They'll have their audio samples. So it's a way for people to come together, get auditions, produce on the level. And then when it's all done, they'll upload everything to that site. It'll go to Audible for approval. And then it's usually on Audible, iTunes, and Google
Reads.
Play. Yeah. So multiple platforms. And it can be a wonderful thing. If you were to compare it to any other medium, it'd be closer to movies because on stage you're demanding attention because there's no camera. The headphones are closer to a camera than they are anything else because you already are a captive audience.
Yes.
So it's that level of intimacy. Some do well. Some people are doing 100 or 50 to 100 audiobooks a year.
Yeah.
So and I'm in the 80% that is still struggling their way up. But in my closet, I've got the microphone, I've got the computer, I've got the whole setup. And it can be great work, very rewarding work. And to me, it's a massive challenge. Like my most thrilling one was a Western called The Ghost of the Guadalupe.
Ooh.
And there's about a dozen characters, but it's the whole thread and knowing every scene and getting the characters introduced, and you are expressing what the author wants. And that was one That was one that I solicited. So I did cold emails and I did a recording of the first 15 minutes and I sent it to the author and we
Oh, wow.
chatted. Um, and we put the book, we did it through the ACX website. And just for anybody who's curious, there's a couple of ways of being paid. So you can do complete royalty share, where I, as the narrator, would do the book. I would be responsible for the editing, the mastering, all that technical stuff. And then Audible would get, I believe, 40%, and the author and I would split the remaining 30% each.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, and those can be massive. If you
Mm-hmm.
sell 1,000 of those and they're $11 each, it's a good payday. There's also royalty share plus, where the author will spend, let's say, upwards of $1,000 to pay for the editing, and then you'll split the royalties like royalty share. Or there's per finished hour, which everybody wants.
Yeah.
Everybody wants. So I like projects between the $200 and $400 per finished hour, meaning that if a book lasts, the finished product is 10 hours, each one of those hours, I get paid $200. So that's a $2,000 payday.
Wow.
Over the course of a month, of a few weeks. Because week 1, I read the book, get into it, prepare it. Week 2, I record it, everything raw. Week 3, ideally, I have the next book, and I'm preparing that while receiving pickups or corrections from the editor. And so hopefully while I'm preparing the next book I'll do, later on that day, I'll do all my pickups, send them through, and then we have a finished product. And in 10 days' time, ACX or Audible will listen to it and then put it up.
Wow.
So there's various ways of going about it. And then there's, Penguin, Random House, Macmillan, Hachette, and all those as well. Now with bigger books like Stephen King, you're going to get per finished hour. You'd want royalty share.
Yes.
Because it's going to sell like 50,000 copies.
Yeah, Stephen King.
That's how much we're great at.
Yeah.
But he's going to keep those.
Of course, yeah. He deserves it.
So it's just, you got to find your niche. And it's very similar. And I have acting coaches, Joe Hempel, Shannon Parks, Sean Pratt, excuse me, who've been invaluable. And you can take the same principles to the screen, to the stage, and all that. I think even in music, people want drama.
Yeah.
In everything. They want passion and drama.
Exactly. Compelling. I think that's the word. Is something compelling, even if you can't really relate to it, but if you're compelled, then that's great, because it's like I'm invested to see what happens with these characters.
Even as I'm not a musician, as just a layman kind of, I want something to knock my socks off.
Yeah.
I want to be impressed all the time.
Yes, absolutely. And also, what's on music, that's actually another key point is I think also when you're acting, you try to find the rhythm of a dialogue. It's like music, kind of like a song has its stanza. And because imagine if you had, and this is kind of a tip for writers too, is that few syllables are good. That way, when you build a paragraph, it's kind of like you don't want just a long running sentence because you can't catch your breath. It's kind of like, okay, just like if you're singing a song, we need to catch our breath here. But it's similar to dialogue. So it's kind of like you find the rhythm of it. So do you try to find when you're recording, do you try to find the rhythm of a piece where it's like, okay, this is how I'm going to say it, pause, or I'm going to take a breath here. Do you look for things like that too when you're reading anything?
So with theater, you can do it. You can work a line until it feels right.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll only read a book once, because if it's 300 pages,
Yeah.
you're not doing yourself any justice by breaking it down, memorizing it. You're not going to do that. So it does have to have a beat. I believe it does have to have a rhythm. And I would recommend like TED I can't remember his last name. Chescolte, I think is his last name. But look up No Country for Old Men if you're looking for an audiobook.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a plain, very difficult way of language in that book, which he turns into a beat. He was able to turn everything into a beat, and da 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 da, in such a way that it's like, oh no, something really bad is going to happen, and and it's naked, it's bold. The thing about the written word is it's right there. Yes. And it can't be altered. So I guess the point of it is there's a lot of confidence behind it. And that's kind of the struggle. I guess more of the struggle is you may know that you're good at it, but you got to get out there. Yeah. You got to get your name known. It's no good, being the only person who listens.
Yes.
I think.
Yeah, because you definitely need feedback to kind of hear, because sometimes you can do some things in a vacuum, but unless you're with amongst other peers or other actors or directors, it's kind of like, okay, I can see where this is going. I'm getting their reactions. Yeah, so is that what you're meaning in terms of just trying to go for it so that way you get the feedback you need to know?
Absolutely. Yeah. Not to rethink things or overthink things too much. I was doing samples and I was having difficulty. I was just what am I not hearing correctly? I got a coach. I call him up and I don't call him. I just said, Haire, will you listen to this? And then he sends me this, boom, this. Yeah. I think this is what's going on. Essentially, it is like, here, stop overthinking it. Just tell me the story. Okay. And then I send him the next time and he's like, perfect. Not perfect. There was more. But all about refining. There's always something there. Find the audience or try to find the service behind it. Yes. How can I make somebody's life better? Maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's a wonderful feeling if you're acting a character and you either move people or you make them smile. Because I've done some acting too. Like if you're approaching different characters, kind of like, okay, this is how this character is, or here's the character that you either love to hate or you just hate him, depending on his motivations and what he serves in the story. But yeah, and I think that's important too if you're into acting, is always have an understanding of the story, what you're telling. But that seems wonderful what you're already doing. So I think that's great, especially for younger generations. Yeah. And also before I forget, I think we're close to the final time limit, let's talk about Fountain Square Players. So once you started working with them, because they're a community theater here in Bowling Green, Kentucky. They've been around since I think the 1970s, so almost
some time.
Yeah, some time. So with your collaborations with them, like Witness for the Prosecution and Haunting of Hill House, so have you always known about Fountain Square Players, or was it until you did those two productions that's when you became more involved with them?
That's when I became more involved with them, those last two productions. I had known about them. When I was working in restaurants, it was very difficult. I needed to get closer. So thank goodness I work at the bank now on the square.
Okay.
Excuse me. Oh,
it's okay. It's okay. Take care of your
So, and I never knew. I wasn't quite sure. I thought I thought they were a bit more exclusive. But thank God they're not. They're just people, and it's been a great way to connect with others, to really gauge people's passions, what they want to do, and see what kind of future there is for it. Which I think there is.
Yeah,
there's a loose confederation of people who are excited, and we all want to do our own thing. And I think we're on the cusp of if we could just all agree on one thing.
Yeah.
But time, place, and manner, there's a lot of moving parts, but we're all game. I'm of the opinion, because there's a shop. Yeah. I'm of the opinion we could do a movie. Yeah, just as easily as we could do the next show.
Yeah. Oh,
we just have to agree on it. We need some lighting, some more. We could rent all this equipment, and we could build the sets. So
Yes, because I was part of the set building process as well, which was great as an act, because when I started acting a little bit, that was in 2000, I want to say 2003 or 4. And it was just being amazed at their facilities. So I know exactly what you're talking about. They have a workshop, they have the sets. And I think I thought that too at one point, but I was younger, early 20s or about to turn 20. It's like, yeah, you can do like a little movie. There's like set pieces here, there's costumes. And that's what's great about community theater. It's not just, oh, I'm the actor. You also participate in the set building. So did you do that too? Like helping like paint a set or a
Oh
wall?
yeah.
Yeah. So what were the pieces that you did just as um not just an actor, but you were also so what do you remember what pieces you worked on those productions as like a we'll call it the scenic volunteer who does, the woods crafts and all that stuff.
Sure. Well, I never did the more technical stuff. That was all Alan and all of them at the shop. They gave me a paintbrush. They said, use this on that. And
Yes.
so, yeah, that was a lot of fun. Witness for the prosecution. I was able to help build the box, the witness box, and paint that, and really get into it. And I think that's great too, because um, you should take advantage of those days, because who knows what you might want to do later. You could
Yeah.
say, "Oh, I know how to do all this production stuff."
Mhm.
You could easily help you if you're going to be a director or something like that to project your vision.
Yeah.
So a lot of that kind of stuff. We painted chairs, put casters on things because it was a mobile set. Um, and for the Haunting of Hill House, we had these big panels, and so what we would do is we painted the parlor burgundy, maroon, and all that, and then let that dry. And either we would pat it with kind of a sponge to give it kind of that
Yeah.
other foggy kind of look, or we would let the paint dry, and on the doors we would use this kind of etching black stuff. So from afar it looked like weathered and
Yes.
strong but old.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of just it's just being artistic too. It's kind of like, oh, I have a chance to put my physical stamp on a set. Because I don't know because I know in community theater, I think depending because there's different levels of theater. There's the professional theater like Broadway, there's the movies, of course. And then community theater is one of those things where you don't really necessarily get paid, but it's great. You're performing, and then but you're also doing it's a very community based effort where it's like, okay, we're going to act, but also we're going to build sets. Or hey, we need someone to do props. Can you do props? So it's very so have you found that so that's the true of those productions just being very hands-on? And have you ever done that in previous productions before Fountain Square Players or anything like that?
Very minimally. I I've done hands-on kind of jobs before, and a lot of the principles are the same. You just pick up the hammer, you pick up the drill, and you make sure the points meet, and then you paint and you install. But it's the concept of things and the collaboration that's required, because a director can have a vision, but they don't. It's not like a painter who has to have the vision and then the ability to execute it really in one person over
Yes.
years and years. Director has to be tamed by limitations.
Yes.
Again, I can picture the most dazzling, infinite, universe shattering image in my head, but it would be 3 hours long and everybody would watch it till the end of time, but it can't be
Yeah.
made.
Yeah.
That's, we can all hope. Ron Howard said that every film he's ever worked on is broken. Something has broken his heart. He's always
Hmm.
had his heart set on this that he wanted to have in this one movie or something. They just couldn't have it.
Yeah. That's true.
So you adapt, overcome. This wasn't. It's not like Apollo 13,
Hmm.
but that's you have to have somebody else's authority. So you have to, if you're going to delegate, you have to give that person the authority to hold your vision and to execute it as well.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think when you're an actor, especially if you're doing it for movies, because you never know what scene's going to be on the cutting room floor or what's going to be used. And that can be kind of hard for actors where they do a scene and it's great. There's this great bit you did. And then if you watch, it's like, where did that scene go? Where did they go? So I think it's just trying again adaptability of knowing like okay maybe that scene didn't work because of this as much as it you love it. It's like if we would have kept it, it would have thrown everything off balance. So yeah, you're very right. So I think it is important as an actor if you are in a doing something like a movie, it's like, okay, I'm gonna just give it my best, even if there's a scene that's cut that I love and the director loves. It's overall better for the story, and there's a reason maybe why. But then unless it's in like the extended cut or the director's cut where you
Mhm.
have all these scenes and it's like, oh, now we get to see that because but if you're seeing it for the first time, it's like you don't, like you said, you don't want to bore the audience at all.
And as somebody who's aspiring to be, who would love to be at that level, and darn it, I think I can, with enough vigor and determination, I think anybody can, following the path that everybody else did.
Mhm.
And that's a big part, I think, of the attitude. If you ever see people in, there are certain people in big movies that you never see anymore, or they'll be in a TV show, or you see Johnny Depp in Nightmare on Elm Street,
Mhm.
but nobody else in that movie. I can name maybe one,
Yeah.
two other people, and those are the leads. Why him? Well, maybe because he stuck it out. He
Yes.
realized that if you start nitpicking, like you cut out my scene,
Hmm.
well, you know what? You're going to have to deal with thousands of auditions that are
Hmm.
going to tell you no. Maybe some are going to say you're never going to make it in this industry. Well, no, you got to just stick to. If they cut it, like don't fall in love with it.
Hmm.
Fall in love with making it
Hmm.
and the experience of it. Fall in love with the opportunity, but don't be surprised. And that's the fear I had for so long.
Yeah.
Just word of advice: if you're young, do it now,
Yeah.
and you don't have to go to LA, but put something on the camera.
Yeah.
You can do it now. And then and when you're 15 making a movie,
Hmm.
you can get away with finding Steven Spielberg's agent's email, or maybe not that,
Yeah.
but you who knows?
Yeah.
And you see that that's the way it is. And then somebody had the Scorsese required boldness. Friedkin had to be bold. That's how they made their name. So they shouldn't. I don't think they'd be surprised if some kid were to send them a script, say, "Wait, can I get your thoughts?" They'd be like, "Sure."
Hmm.
Uh,
Yep.
I like to hope.
Yeah. It's kind of like, yeah, like first it's kind of like goes through the wall of like it goes through their agents, like, well, it's kind of like then it goes to Scorsese or something like
Right.
but that
Who knows?
yeah. But also that's another thing too with rejection. And I think Michael Keaton he recently was on an interview, and I think the topic of auditions, because sometimes,
Oh wow.
yeah, the auditions is kind of like, say if you audition for something you really want, but you just don't get it. But I think Michael Keaton had a great attitude where this is what he learned kind of in his early career too. He says, well, if you have a chance to audition, then you've already won. And I think, and he clarified saying the fact that you got to audition means that, you still kind of have a job, even though you didn't get that part. It's kind of like they want you. Otherwise, they've been like, no, no, Michael, we don't need you to audition. But so I kind of liked it's like, okay, that just means you just put your best foot forward and just do your best and whatever the outcome happens happens and it could be something silly like oh well the reason why you weren't cast first in this cast is because this person has the money has an uncle who we need financing but so how do you deal so what happened what's your best advice to deal with rejection if you audition for a part and you don't get it so what's the best advice you can impart on our listeners and watchers
You
on
know, like with the audiobooks, just I send in mini auditions. There are friends that I know in the industry who have been doing it less time, and they're doing much better. And I think they're savvier with other things. I don't want to make excuses. I want to be a student.
Yeah.
They do things I need to do um, better. So don't deny that. You may say to yourself, "Darn, that was a darn good audition." And you have I have a voice in my head that says, "You deserve that.
Yeah.
You deserve it. Darn it." And then there's the voice inside my head that says, "You're never going to make it."
Mhm.
Don't listen to either. That doesn't help in the immediate because I do. But then the third voice my conscious voice has to come in and say, "Don't talk to yourself like that.
Yeah.
Feel this," because you'll get this email that's connected to your ACX profile, your messages saying you have a new message. So you go to your email and like,
Oh, yeah.
uh, it's the life,
Mhm.
you know. That's why I have a full time job,
Yeah.
but I should go for it more. And then there are other things. Then you go back to the drawing board and you say, they may not know who I am. I
Hmm.
need to reach out more. I need to have more of a presence on Facebook. I think I'm going to follow that author on Facebook. I'm
Yeah.
going to make comments if they do say something that interests me, and be a part of the community. And it's a wonderful thing to be able to talk to you over like in this medium,
Hmm.
but there are drawbacks as well.
Yep.
You can't shake hands or really have a good first impression or meaningful or the same kind of first impression. So
Yeah.
I need to get with the program when it comes to social media,
Hmm.
have more outreach and a bit more self marketing when it comes to that, and just study more,
Yeah.
more auditions and more exposure. I would say, David Geffen, who started
Yeah.
Asylum Records.
Yeah.
When he went to Los Angeles or when he was trying to make it, would have lunch with a different person every day.
Hmm.
He saw that as success.
Yeah.
Um, People as currency, not as currency or as things or as
It's just
playthings.
Yeah. And I think that's what's important about networking, whether you're an actor, writer, is you're not trying to use people to get things produced. You're just trying to develop relationships. And then if something comes along, it's like, hey, I have this friend I know who could do this part or something like that. And for those listeners and viewers who don't know who David Geffen is, he is a record producer, but his production company went on to produce films like the first and second Beetlejuice and Little Shop of Horrors and so many other great productions.
Yes, if you look at the DreamWorks logo, you'll see SKG.
Uh,
S is Spielberg, K is Katzenberg, and G is Geffen.
that's right. Yeah, a lot of people
So,
know that. Yeah, that's exactly
uh,
right.
so not too bad. But Paul Rudd talked about the same thing. It's like, sure, yeah, it's the business. That's the one part of the business. That's the part of the business aspect of the business that
Yes.
can't be avoided. There may
Hmm.
be some more business floof that doesn't need to be there,
Hmm.
but that's a part of it.
Yeah.
Sorry, they want you to be great, so he would send them a thank you note. Paul Rudd,
Yeah.
thanks. This is huge because then the future Brad Pitt would walk through the door,
Hmm.
and like he's in good company.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think that's important too. So even if you don't get an audition, be sure to write a thank you, like, hey, thank you so much for the opportunity. And also just having, I think, sense of humility too. Like you said earlier, if you have the voice saying, oh, I deserved it, or no, I didn't. So humility is really the conscience of saying, you know what, I did the best I could, but it's kind of like let go and, just kind of move on to something else because you never, or it could be a door closed for a particular reason for something better. Uh,
Yeah,
like, like I think of, so yeah, so I think with a lot of people who are starting out as actors, I think again, adaptability is good to where, and it's hard not to take it personal because if you put your feelings on display, that vulnerability, it just stings. So I think as long as you try to know it's not like anything personal, it's just, you know what, for some reason I'm not right for this. So, hopefully, I just got to be ready, just a little do better and work on it. Do you think that's accurate in that regard?
Absolutely. What can I control? Let's start with the roles that I know that I can't play.
Mhm.
Half of the population of the world I know I can't play. Um, or, let's take, and then I can't play people below a certain age, and that's fine. So go with the controllables.
Mhm.
The difficult thing is to know what to control. What are
Yeah.
the you know if I'm a track and field person, I can record my time, my mile time,
Yes.
and I can judge and gauge and hit my goals based on that. It's tough with something that doesn't have a yardstick,
Mhm.
like acting.
Yeah.
I think the best option really is to find out, is to do the boldest thing, probably the thing you're not ready to do, but be nice, be
Mhm.
professional, be quiet when you're supposed to be early, be smile, be nice, don't
Mhm.
ask for anything, have the voice and do all this stuff. And then they're going to probably realize, wow, that person made a great impression because they weren't a problem.
Yes, exactly.
And they asked me about my day. And that, maybe that's that currency thing. That's, making those impressions and making those connections. That's,
Yeah,
then you'll get in front of more eyes.
exactly.
You want to get in front of more eyes and more ears.
Exactly. And it just comes down to treat others the way you want to be treated. So, and I think it's important. So it's like, okay, if I was the director and I was the actor, like you said, it's just treat others well and just do your best work and hopefully success will follow.
Try to solve their problem.
Yes, yeah.
Because if it's a commercial shoot, more likely these ad agencies, they look great, but
Hmm.
those people are in the same boat as you.
Yes.
They've been auditioning and auditioning and auditioning, and they need the right person too. And if this works, that's rent.
Yep, that's right.
That's a year's worth of rent. I could live with that.
Yeah. And then, and also a final thought too, before we jump into our next segment of this interview, was that also when is it appropriate to say something if something can be better? I'll use Wendy Silva as a perfect example where she very, very kindly, politely, like the whole thing we discussed earlier about changing the word vote to support, so that way it was historically accurate for women couldn't vote, but they could support, in some fashion. So, has there been any times
So
for
sorry.
you? No, you're good. So, is there any times if you as an actor who thought, you know what, I might have an idea, like improv, like when is it appropriate to do improv? Or it's like, hey, I might have a better suggestion. Like, what if because it's sometimes interesting if you read a script and then you'll notice there was changes done, and that was in collaboration with the actor and the writer and director that wasn't originally on the page. Has that ever happened to you where thought, you know what, this because there's one beat you did in Magical Candy, which I love, where it was all chaotic scene where in the scene, everyone's has the magical candy. They're all possessed by these talents. Everything's like a crazy asylum, and your character is stuck, or one of the characters, because he also played
Oh, right,
multiple,
yeah.
like who sings. But there was a line that was just happened sporadically. I think it was like, Leonard, where are you? But I love he's like, Leonard, where the hell are you? And I loved it because I was like, and I
Was
was,
I not supposed to say that?
well, it was
Oh, I
just,
don't remember.
it was just, I had slip of the tongue, but I loved it because it emphasized the chaos. Because I had debated about putting what the hell, because we've had lines
Sorry.
what kind of hell have you got me into, Leonard? Or like or get me the hell, or get me the hell out of here. So now, but I think it was nice because it was a nice little beat where it's like it's kind of like Jimmy Buffett's song, like some people claim there's a woman to blame, but I know it's kind of like you kind of
Hell, it could be. Yeah.
so I like that. So it's kind of like, oh, okay. So we have your character saying, "What kind of hell have you got me into? Like, get me the hell out of here!" And then your character's like, "Leonard, where the hell are you?" And it just was beautiful. And that was just by accident. It wasn't planned. And of course,
That was, I don't, I'm sorry.
No, don't. It was great because it just happened. It was again spontaneous, where you had, it's kind of like, yeah. So I loved it. So now it's kind of like, so it's great because that's happy accidents, and sometimes we can't predict it, and that's why when you're in that moment, it's great. So, but that's the one thought I love. I love it. So no apologies necessary. I loved it because it dovetailed perfectly. What we just needed another hell in there. That's all we needed. So
I could always add more. Yeah.
yeah, it's like
Uh, so for one recent one for witness for the prosecution, I found that I was struggling with toward the end. Spoiler,
yeah.
is that okay? It's been around a long
Sure,
time.
sure, sure.
Leonard's found innocent, not guilty. He's found not guilty, and then his true colors come out, and his wife, who is actually in love with him in reality of the show,
Mhm.
and he rejects her as coldly as she had been pretending to be toward the sweet innocent Leonard.
Yeah.
Um, and then he, on a dime, he's very mean, like very. And I said some mean things, and I thought some mean things, but it took me a lot. I couldn't find there's a personal thing that I just wasn't there, and so I asked Brooke, who played my wife in the show, could you just start punching me, or
Yeah.
like that kind of thing? I need to struggle a little bit, and that would get me out. That would at least help me. It's like putting the ball on the tee.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it was like that. And then I said, "Hey, director
hmm
Wendy,
Yes.
is this okay? Because I'm struggling, I'm having a hard time. Does it look okay?" And she was okay with it, great with it. Don't take over the show. If you're going to ad lib a line, do it on accident, like I did. um, do it to keep the show on track. That's when knowing the show is great, because I had a good deal of lines in Haunting of Hill House, but I made many mistakes,
Oh,
and the
really?
audience couldn't know it.
I
That's
had
the goal.
yeah.
Move the story forward and don't show it to the audience. And then don't take credit. Don't say like, "Oh yeah, I wrote half the show up there tonight." Nobody wants to work with somebody. No one wants to work with an extra who does stuff like that,
Yeah,
or like who's all like stealing the scene.
it's extra. Now, if it creates something memorable, that's great. But if it's like detracting or they just take over the show, it's like, okay, we're off story. But yeah. But just as an audience member for Haunting of Hill House, I did not see any mistakes. So whatever they were, I did not see them. I because I was on board with the story, the characters. So yeah, so you did wonderfully. You did wonderfully in all those productions.
And thank you very much. And the goal is not, I don't want to make mistakes, and I don't want the license to make mistakes because somebody wrote it.
Mhm.
Somebody really wrote this, and that's what I want to honor. But I can see it coming when it's happening,
Yeah,
and I don't have it in me to turn back time
yeah,
and start over.
exactly.
And I want to be fair to everybody else as well. Um,
Yeah.
it's a
But
team sport.
exactly. And also, and if there's something like what you just said earlier with witness for the prosecution, you realize, you know what, I just need something for that motivation to get me there. And that's true collaboration because you realize, you know what, it just needs something for me to do. Then you had it with your co-star, then you talked it over with the director, Wendy in this case, and it worked great. Just as an audience member, you could see it like because sometimes it's like, have we hit what you call the story beats? And it's like, you know what, I just need something like that just to help me get to that moment where I need to go. Because sometimes writers, like, even if they're doing their best work, writers aren't perfect either. We try and anticipate everything, but usually it's like, oh, we should have done that. So, yeah, collaboration is important, hearing your actors. And it's like, you know what? I need to add more to this character. This actor is doing fantastic. Why haven't I thought of this before? But I think that's the beauty of collaboration with actors, where you really see something, what's working and what's not. So it's wonderful that you're that team player, that you're able to, whether it's being, in baseball terms, whether it's the catcher or if you're the pitcher or just the outfielder, you're still being a team collaborator. Well, I think that's what makes you a wonderful actor, honestly. I can sing your praises all
Thank
day.
you.
Um,
You're too kind.
and it's true. And now for the closing segment, we're going to talk about your most influential films or books or stories. So, like you talked about the one with Robert Mitchum, we talked about that a little bit. But just what movies that if you're at home and it's like, you know what, I'm going to watch this movie. What would the ones you like just enjoying, whether it's adventure, comedy, or so it's what are what's your go-to movies that you just absolutely love?
Right off the top of my mind, from a very early age, um, in sixth grade social studies, we watched Mr. Smith Goes to Washington,
Oh, that's
and it's about the compelling nature of everything of the narrative. Jimmy Stewart, I think he shows that.
Mhm.
Here's the thing about Jimmy Stewart: he's got more charisma in his little finger,
Yes.
and he can't help it.
Hmm.
So when he comes on initially, he's very meek, and he's
Hmm.
able to shrink himself to be tiny. He's a good man, but he's not used to all this, the cameras and all that, the attention. And then you don't see that it's this wonderful growth of how a person can be a good person and serve their country.
Hmm.
It was just you want to get up and cheer, and it's made
Yeah.
almost 100 years ago, and it shows the power, the
Yes.
effect of it, of where the camera can go because he's nervous talking to a girl, and it just shoots to him playing with his hat. He seems calm and collected, but his hat's behind him, and he's holding it and he's scrunching it. Uh, he's collapsing into his hands in front of the Lincoln Memorial.
Yeah.
Raging Bull
No, another
to
good one.
take a new, different, because he's Jake LaMotta is a bad guy, um, and it shows that even bad people can have arcs.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Maybe that makes them worse people, but what's compelling is what's interesting about the people. I felt like Robert De Niro was actually maybe too much into it. I don't know if that's possible, but the movie bookends with him as the heavier retired Jake LaMotta. He's doing nightclub circuits for celebrity appearances, stand up to make a couple of bucks, and he's rehearsing the on the waterfront monologue, and he's such an amazing actor. He's playing a character who can't act,
Hmm.
and he's butchering this. He's monologue, and yet I can't stop loving what he's doing because giving such a great performance as a different person who can't act. He's such a great actor; he can pretend he's not a good actor,
Yeah.
and that upsets me. The Breakfast Club, because I can't get over the nostalgia behind it,
Yes.
the honesty behind it,
Hmm.
um, and most recently, I think Juno
Yes.
is
Yeah.
the best movie I've seen this century.
Hmm.
I don't know why people don't talk about it more.
Yeah. It's a great character study, and unique circumstances of a young girl getting pregnant and is like, hey, I'm gonna sell my baby to the biggest bidder, and that's where you have like Jennifer Garner's character and Jason Bateman. Yeah, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
I mean, it's just I think it was old enough. It was the first time I saw a movie where I'm nothing like Juno.
Mhm.
I could never be anything like Juno. I know of no other art. If there was a painting of Juno instead, I caught a glimpse. I would like to think I caught a glimpse and so much sympathy, I hope,
Yeah.
for what she's putting on this brave face. And I really hope I did feel like that person because that happens in life.
Hmm.
And it makes me really consider how hard that must be. And I can't imagine,
Yeah.
but I can't believe that a movie was able to have that kind of effect on a 27-year-old man
Yeah.
and
It
realize how stupid I was and how ignorant I am of the world
no.
in a good way, I
Yeah, in a
guess.
good way. And it just kind of creates the sense of empathy too. And I think is important, even if you have a villain and their reasons. Because sometimes, even if we see a villain, not to compare June as a villain, I mean, she's just a young girl who got way over her head. It's like, how do you do this, But I think it's important to have the empathy, even as a villain, because that's why it's kind of like there's not just two-dimensional, there's more to them. Um, but yeah, but that's a wonderful example. Juno's a great, it's a great movie, and that was directed by Jason Reitman, the son of the late Ivan Reitman, who directed Ghostbusters. And oh yeah,
Stripes.
yeah, Stripes, yeah, and also film called
Um,
Balls, and
yeah.
what he also did, I think Dave, starring Kevin Kline.
Dave, yes.
Yeah, so
Incredible.
yes,
There are some movies out there. Well, yeah, you're right. He
yeah.
did get better. That's a really
Oh,
good movie.
yeah, and then Jason Reitman, of course, following in his dad's footsteps.
Thank
Uh,
You for Smoking.
yeah, Thank You for Smoking. And recently he did Saturday Night Live. No, Saturday Night. Yeah, Saturday Night, based on the first night of, which I still have to see, by the way. I've heard
Yeah.
talk about it. But yeah, and is there any other films? Just even if it's something, like
The movie, the movie I think about all the time, probably talk to myself about, is A History of Violence. I didn't
yeah.
want to end on a sour note, but that's the story of perhaps a villain later on in life. And in a nutshell, in a very small town, there's a diner that's closing up, a few employees and some customers, and two guys bust in. They're strangers, and they stick up the joint. And everybody thinks they want the money and maybe to scare them. But the diner owner, Tom, he thinks they're going to do something different. And so he turns the tables and he becomes a national hero and saves 10 people. He's very shy. He doesn't want the cameras in front of him. But inevitably, they do. And sometime later, these guys from the Philadelphia mob roll into town, and they think Tom is this guy named Joey, who was a mobster years ago,
uh,
and the complete opposite of this good-natured Tom. Tom did what he did because he loves his people, and they were going to get worse things would happen. You have to do bad to do good.
mhm.
That's the idea behind it. But in reality, Joey would do that for fun.
Yeah,
So how could somebody like that be this? So,
yeah.
and all the wacky hijinks that occur in between.
That's true. And then that movie starred Viggo Mortensen, who played Aragorn in Lord of the Rings. Such a
That was, yeah, he did that right after.
Yeah, he did. He just jumped right into it. And was that, I might be wrong. Was that not David Cronenberg? I don't,
Exactly. That was
was
David
that right?
Cronenberg.
Okay. And of
And
course, yeah.
people would say that that's not a, I think there's some controversy among Cronenberg fans about it because it's not his usual ooh. It's not
Yeah.
his, um,
Because he's been known for directing movies like The Fly, also Dead Zone, the Stephen King adaptation of that novel, and kind of, more of those horror types. But yeah,
mhm.
you're right. With that, within that, yeah.
Plus it's tight. It's like an hour, 40 minutes. I think the craftsmanship, the simplicity, I could do an hour long YouTube video and it would be insane. You'd think I'm insane.
No,
But
no.
of all the things that's a wonderful thing about a book, great movie. There's depth. There's so much more underneath.
Yes. Absolutely, yeah. And that's what makes this great storytelling coupled with great actors who bring that to life. So
Mhm.
yeah. And but yeah, so I'm just noticing my time. So unfortunately we do have to end this interview, but thank you so much again, Tom, for
Wow.
yeah, I realized like holy crap. We like but thank you so much for just taking the time to just talk. It's been great catching up with you. And are you doing now that you finished Haunting of Hill House a month ago, are you just gonna give yourself a break and to look for the next project? Because I think you told me earlier you're gonna try to do a little bit of writing. Is that it? Or
Yeah, I want to be able to present something. I'm looking for something I can, 30 pages long max that
Mhm.
has the ability to be expanded upon.
Yeah,
Something that you can take to a studio and say, hey, this is doable.
yeah,
And this is something that can be done in a month and we can spend X amount, a reasonable amount on it,
yeah.
even in the thousands of dollars, something to be so. it's odd. The revolution, I think, is going to be quality, small budget quality.
Yeah. And that's just a lot of independent short filmmakers are able to do that. Yeah.
And they'll work it out.
Yeah. And if you need help with that, you just let me know. Again, I do writing, and also there's a great screenwriting website by Terry Razio, wordplayer.com. And then there's by John August on his website, where he is better known for writing the films for Go, Big Fish, Frankenweenie. So yeah, so I have resources. So if you need them, just let me know.
I will let you know. Thank you. You'll be the first.
All right. But yeah, so again, thank you so much, Tom. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching my conversation with special guest actor and audiobook narrator Tom Haire. If you have enjoyed this episode of Reed's Conversations, be sure to click the like button and subscribe button on my YouTube channel. That way you will be notified for future upcoming episodes. Also, be sure to visit Tom Haire's official website, www.tomhairepress.com.